Hello, this is Good Evening Kenya. Good evening, your country. Dr. Susan Gitao, your lecturer, Counseling Practicum 1. This is lecture 11, Ethical Considerations in Counseling Practice. Welcome. This lecture will explain the importance of the ethical practice in counseling. Every counselor conducting counseling should be guided by the ethical requirements in their country and or professional bodies they are affiliated to. And this lecture will define what counseling ethics is and related terms, and also seek to guide on how a counselor can practice within the counseling ethical boundaries. Expected learning outcomes is that at the end of this lecture, you will be able to define related terms in counseling ethics, explain the importance of counseling ethics, and identify situations to apply counseling ethics. Ethics is a term that is generally defined as a philosophical discipline that is concerned with human conduct and moral decision making. Human beings would be quite chaotic without ethical guidelines to follow or guide their behavior. Counselors too are guided by ethical principles and obligations in the counseling field. And so we would say ethics are normative in nature and focus on principles and standards that govern relationships between individuals. For example, in the counseling practice, the counselor and the client, or the counselor supervisor and the counselor supervisee. It can also be a counselor and another counselor. But most important, it is the counselor who has been trained, who knows better, versus the client. Ethics are also quite useful because you may find that if you do not practice within the ethical boundaries, you are not sure, especially when you find yourself in ethical dilemmas. What are you supposed to do? If you find yourself in situations that the court of law requires you maybe to give evidence in court, what are you supposed to do? And so it's important that as a counselor, you get to know what is counseling ethics, situations you can apply, and most important, as a counseling intern or the one who is proceeding for practicum, are you aware that you're required to operate in a certain way, that you are supposed to apply ethical codes from the counseling profession in everything that you do? The other related terms in counseling practice that would really inform the practice of counseling ethics. Some of these terms, you will find them across other professional practices. There is no profession that doesn't have its own ethical codes. And actually, most professions are run under a legal instruments or acts that are put in place by the government of that country. Like in my country, Kenya, we just got our Counselors and Psychologists Act not long time ago, passed in Parliament in 2014. And after review 2019, 2020, then this year, we were able to get the constitution of our National Counselors and Psychologists Board. What does that tell you? That if we practice ethically in my country, we practice because we borrow a lot from American Psychological Association. We borrow a lot from British Association of Counselors. We borrow a lot from maybe Australian Counseling Association. We borrow a lot from what has been applied elsewhere. And sometimes it's good that you know that in Africa counseling is not very old. And even if it has been there for a while, the socio-cultural challenges have been in existence because of our closed-up nature. We don't like to talk, we don't like to really share our problems, and for a long, long time, Africans believed we are a community, we need to live together. I don't know about your country, where you are in terms of the ethical codes and the counseling acts. Some of the terms that you may come across everywhere, we are thinking about ethics, we are thinking about professional practice, is morality. And this refers to situations or behaviors that are judged as good, bad, wrong, ought, and should situations. Perspectives of right and proper conduct that involves an evaluation of actions based on some broader cultural context or religious standard. And so maybe you may find in your country, this is what is just as morally right, and this is immoral, you know? It's good to note that and kind of reflect on what happens in your country. Ethics refers to the beliefs we hold about what constitutes the right conduct, or basically moral principles adopted by an individual or a group to provide rules for right conduct or rules of engagement, like in counseling practice. What are the ethics? We're going to see that. Values, these are beliefs and attitudes that provide direction for everyday living. And I think this is very, very common in any society. Ethical conduct refers to the combination of knowledge and a clear conception of the principles that underlie an ethics code. Community standards. They are societal principles that define what is considered reasonable behavior by individuals in a particular area. And that happens even in my country. You'll be so shocked. You will find, like, when we have people from the coast, we have people from central Kenya, we have people from eastern, you may find that there's a way that community behaves. There's a way they will treat strangers. There's a way they will treat one another. And so even the counseling profession is a community. And you will realize that when people do train in counseling and they start practicing counseling, there is a way they talk to one another. There is a way they talk to clients. The conversation changes. There's a lot of the way you will apply empathy, because you have a duty of not to harm, you know. There is a way maybe you are going to apply autonomy, uh, even when you know maybe in the African context, maybe the older ones always reprimand the young ones, but now in counseling, you realize you're required to be at an equal level. And so there are standards for the counseling community. Reasonableness refers to the care that is ordinarily exercised by others practicing within that specialty in the professional community. And that is what also helps in introducing, for example, how you can resolve ethical dilemmas. What about types of ethics? We have mandatory ethics. They are concerned with behavioral rules wherein counselors act in compliance with minimal standards that acknowledge the basic must and must nots. For example, we always say that counselors are not above the law, just like everybody else in any land is not above the law. And there are certain things that you have to know inherently that you cannot do. And even if you're not counseling, in counseling practice, you may find yourself in deep trouble with the law. We have inspirational ethics. They describe the high standards of thinking that requires counselors to not apply the codes of ethics, but to also understand the spirit behind the code, and to also probably even keep reviewing and reflecting and finding out what is the best that works here. And this one takes us to more of some of the incoming highly popularized flexibility practice, like cognitive flexibility practice, where you find if I do this and this, my client will benefit more than when I will do A, B, C, D. And so, like in Africa, we've had our own challenges, to be very honest. We've been brought up as a community that is quite generous, a community that greets, a community that has a way of answering greetings, a way of responding to a stranger. And because most clients are a stranger to the counselor, you sort of find yourself applying some of the ethos, some of the standards, some of the practices that you learned as a young person growing upwards. And so I don't know what is there in your country. We do have principal ethics. They focus on moral issues wherein they try to answer this question: is this situation ethical? Therefore, they attempt to solve ethical dilemmas as well. I'm doing this by principle. You'll hear many people say so. This is the way I found it fit. And it's a lot of reflection. Virtue ethics focus on the character traits of the counselor and try to answer the question, am I doing what is best for my client? And so many counselors you will find, like in Africa, you will find them affiliated to maybe religious groupings or communities. You will find them in the human resource. You will find them in the teaching career. And in most cases, you'll find they practice virtuous life. And so when it comes to counseling, sometimes it's not a very huge challenge for them. Professional counselors, however, need to integrate virtue and principle ethics to reach the better ethical decisions and develop good policies. It is important to remember the purpose of ethics code is to safeguard the welfare of clients by providing what is in their best interest. And in most cases, then we can say, when a client is able to monitor his or her own ethics, then we are good to go. But you cannot monitor, evaluate what you don't know. It has to be what you know, what you're aware of, what you have embodied, and what you are practicing. So, what is the importance of ethical codes? For a group of people with similar interests to be called professionals, we need a code of ethics which provide guidelines for ethical professional behavior of members. Protect the profession from the government, that is, make the profession autonomous. Help to control internal disagreements, thus promoting stability within the profession and protect counselors from the public, especially regarding malpractice suits. Very, very important. And I want to tell you this is very critical, because at the end of the day, you will really need, in the real sense, to understand that what you're doing, maybe nobody else understands. If you do not operate within a code of ethics that is defined and regulated by your profession, you might find yourself in a big, big, big problem, or even conflicts with other professions, conflict with the law. And this is one of the most challenging practices for counselors, especially where regulation is not in place. And so I can tell you it's been very challenging, especially in my country, without an act of parliament guiding our practice for many years. So many professional bodies have tried to come up to ensure that people are practicing ethically, people are practicing legally. But when there is no common pool, you may find even abuse among counselors versus counselors, counselors versus clients, supervisors versus supervisees. And sometimes it can be counselors versus the public, or people are exploited, people are taken advantage of because they have no idea. A lot of pain, people have failed. Some counselors don't know because there is no clear definition of their boundaries. They do not know whether they have crossed the boundaries. They have no idea. And so they get hurt as they hurt other people. Sometimes you may find that there are situations that clients don't know their rights. Clients don't know who to go to. And that is where you find in developed communities or developed countries where this ethical practice in counseling has been there for a long, long time. You can find that they're very particular. They are very particular on exactly how they conduct business and how they conduct their affairs. They try their level best to ensure that they give the best practice, they give the best service to whoever they are serving. They also try a lot to protect the profession. Just so the doctors have their own way of life, the lawyers have their own way of life, even counselors. For them to brand the counseling profession, for them to protect the ethos of the counseling ethics or counseling practice, they must work as one. And they also find that it's easy for them to solve their own disputes because they have a code they can always go to. They have a code they can always say, this is what we are going to apply in our situation. Very, very critical and very, very important. Limitations concerning codes of ethics. What exactly are we talking about? These are limitations and problems that professionals encounter as they strive to be ethical. Everybody would want to do good. Every professional would want to do good. As a counselor, it is good to be well equipped and aware of such. The ones discussed below may apply. They are not all of them here, but they may apply. For example, some issues cannot be handled exclusively by relying on ethics codes. Some may rely on the rule of law in that land. Some may apply maybe in a big field that you operate in. Like in my country, we have the Mental Health Act and we have the Counselors and Psychologists Act. And very many people in the Mental Health Act are psychiatrists and psychiatrist nurses. The people in the Counselors and Psychologists Act, just as it reads, are counselors and psychologists. But these two are actually dealing with mental health issues. And so you might find some of what is in the Mental Health Act being applied in the Counselors and Psychologists Act, and vice versa. Some codes will lack clarity and precision, and that is why they continuously get reviewed. As societies change, issues that are addressed in counseling, they keep changing. And so you will not sit there and maybe use a code that is not clear. It will be revised, it will be reviewed. And so most of these codes of ethics are not static, they are dynamic. Knowing ethics codes does not necessarily make you practice ethically, which is very true. A code of ethics cannot guarantee ethical behavior. And that is a practice I can tell you is true. Because I have seen people who know everything. They know about the law. They know about what should apply here and what should not apply here. And at the end of the day, you find that they are not practicing that. And so it's one thing knowing the ethical codes, and it's another thing applying the ethical codes. And I would encourage you as a student who is just proceeding for practicum or who is in advanced internship experience right now to try as much as possible. Anytime there is some dilemma you face in your practice, or every time you like a client is request something and you don't understand how to go about it, kindly quickly go to your supervisor and quickly refer to the code of ethics that you are using at that particular time, so that you can continuously engage yourself in the practice that is ethical in this counseling profession. Sometimes clients may not have the knowledge or experience to determine whether a counselor is practicing ethically. And I have told you that's the way it is in my country, but things are changing. Things are taking a different dimension, where we are saying, because there is a law now, there is a board now that will oversight, will oversee what is happening, or offer oversight to other counseling professional associations. Then those professional associations must hold their members accountable to practice ethically. And there is nothing wrong with that. I guess that makes a very just society, a harmonious society, a peaceful society. Where does that leave you? And that is why we say a bit of your work as a counselor is to educate the client. And that happens from the onset, when you let the client know some of the rules of engagement in counseling. When you tell them it is okay for you to stop me if I am probing you and you feel like I am creating antagonism in you, you can stop me. When you feel very uncomfortable or overwhelmed, you can stop me. You can even leave therapy room if it's too much for you. Educate them so that they don't sit there and they're feeling so bad, and then they're feeling very uncomfortable. You're making them talk, talk things they have never talked before in their lifetime, and they're feeling overwhelmed. If you told them from the beginning that you can always stop, they will not take you the way in my country maybe we used to be beaten by our parents. That's punishment. And they will tell you, I do not want to hear you cry or even shout, or just I hear a sound from you. That is like, it's like you're oppressing them all. So in the counseling practice, you educate them especially about their own welfare during therapy. You educate them about some of the techniques that you're using. You educate them about some of the harm or the backdraft, like those people who practice mindfulness and mindful self-compassion, close to psychoanalysis. You may find that clients may uncover very unpleasant memories from their subconscious or their unconscious, and they can get pretty overwhelmed. They can feel like you are the one who is causing them pain, like you're traumatizing them. Let them know in advance. And that is why every counselor ought to understand, ought to be very competent in what they are doing. Reason, we tell counselors, find out in the broad counseling practice, from all the units you've covered, which areas are you most competent in, so that you reduce the levels of malpractice or the levels of practicing unethically. There is beauty in you being competent in what you do. Whether you are a relationship counselor, you are a trauma therapist like me, you are a clinical practitioner expert like me, it's good to just make sure you're good, you're competent. Because competence will reduce in a very big way the level of harm on our clients. Sometimes conflicts will emerge within ethics codes as well as among various organizations codes. Yeah, I have seen this in my country, where we have one of the largest bodies called the Kenya Counseling Psychological Association. If you Google that in Kenya, you'll see we are close to 8,000 now members. And you realize some of the documents that we apply, especially the Constitution, is very shallow. It's very old, and it does not speak to our challenges of today. And so revision is demanded like yesterday. The code of ethics is also shallow, looking at what is happening now with a lot of changes in the society. Lots of changes. And so you may find now counselors doubling as mediators. They are doing that in my country. And I don't know whether that should be ethically accepted or not ethically accepted. So you find, like, you can find the law has its own ethical way of practicing, and then the counselors and psychologists and others. But right now in my country, you will find that people who are counselors are now practicing as court annex mediators, and they get letters. And I wonder how clearly that is being combined, so that somebody does not go and overstep, or you do not go and offer counseling instead of probably offering mediation. It's just a point of interest for you. Professionals who belong to different professional associations or bodies may have numerous codes of ethics which may not be uniform. So that requires them to master all of them in their own way. And that happens actually. In my country, I can tell you, you will find somebody who is maybe a teacher, and they're also a counselor. Maybe we have the code of ethics in teaching, we have the code of ethics in counseling. You may find this one is a lawyer, and they have their own code of ethics in law and the code of ethics in counseling. And these are some of the dilemmas that are very common with developing countries. Whereby people begin as general practitioners, they are finding themselves, they are finding their way, they are trying to find out whether they are doing counseling properly, they are relying on theoretical orientations that have been developed elsewhere. So they really don't know whether this applies to them or it doesn't apply to them. They don't know how to pick what fits their cultural context, and many more challenges or dilemmas that professional counselors can face. A practitioner's personal value may conflict, or personal values may conflict with a specific standard within an ethics code. For example, you may find a counselor who is so religious, and so they get a client who presents an issue that does not make sense or does not feel or sound comfortable in relation to their personal values. What are they supposed to do with that client? If they chase them away, have they harmed them? If they keep them, how are they present for them? Or their conflict within is affecting the counseling process. So it's important that we do an inventory of our personal values, so that we get to know if these are my personal values, and this is what is expected of counseling ethics. Where does the rubber meet the road? Where do we meet? Where do I have an integration? Codes may conflict also with institutional policies and practices. That happens a lot. Like in human resource management, I have seen very many counselors who are employed having conflicts with human resource. I have also seen different counselors working together, applying maybe policies, institutional policies. For example, I have seen counselors in one pool You have an addiction counselor, you have a sex therapist, you have a marriage and family therapist, and you may find that maybe codes of ethics are different from those practices, but these people are supposed to work together. You may also find that some policies, like workplace policies, are different from one organization to another, and so are the practices. Ethics codes need to be understood within a cultural framework. Yeah. Hence, they need to be adapted to specific cultures. And that's why I'm saying, like, if you are in a developing country like my own country, it's important. Like, we revise our code of ethics, we revise our policies in counseling to fit our own cultural practices. Because otherwise, if we don't look for a way that these two are going to meet, we're going to have a lot of conflict in our practice, and we might end up harming clients who are our core business. Food for thought for you in your own country. Food for that. Courts may not align to state laws or regulations. Yeah. Like when we tell people that we are asking the client maybe to tell their story so that they can make sense of what happened to them. We help them in the process. Maybe if you go to law, you are harming. They may say you're harming the client. You are coercing them to share material that is not, they're not ready to share. And so they can say, don't touch there. Sometimes in reverse, they may force the client to testify, for example, when psychologically they are not prepared. What does that tell you? For us now, if you come to our side, we will say that is harmful. We will also say the client has been denied autonomy. They're not doing what they are doing voluntarily. And sometimes we also have relatives, we also have helpers or counselors that have put clients in a rehabilitation center by force. And so you can see the conflict, right? Due to diverse viewpoints within any professional organization, not all members will agree with all proposed ideas concerning codes of ethics. Yeah. That's why I'm telling you they're always under review. Why? Because somebody comes up with something and says, oh, this does not apply. Or even when they are developing these codes of ethics, there are lots of discussions, brainstorming, agreeing and disagreeing. There are many challenges that can come concerning making ethical decisions, and we need to accept that. It is important to keep consulting to be able to effectively deal with them. Applying self-compassion helps in a very big way in dealing with difficult ethical issues. Yeah, like you can just try. And you look at a situation, you find it's paining you also as a counselor, but your hands are tied. I remember one time helping a child, 6-year-old child who had been sexually violated. And you can imagine we counselors applying compassionate, empathetic communication. But if this child is taken before the jury, the way they are expected to talk, and sometimes you're the one handling this child, the mindful self-compassion practitioners find themselves allowing sometimes to just go through the painful phase, the painful process with your client. But they will feel safe with you. They will know you're there. Many times I have felt like that with children. Sometimes I can see that's not right, but it's not within my boundaries. It's not within my ethical mandate, or it's not within my power. And so I'm just encouraging you so that you don't get discouraged in this counseling practice. Sometimes it's even, I've seen that in medicine. Yeah, I've seen that in nursing. I've seen that in law. Yeah, where somebody says, even though so and so was defended on a very serious note, they committed a crime. But when you have self-compassion, where you can't do anything about a situation, just allow the difficult emotion, the difficult thought, the difficult sense to just melt away. You'll be stronger. Ethics and the law. It is essential to recognize that ethical issues in the mental health profession are regulated not only by ethics code, but also by the laws governing a particular country. Neither law nor professional codes provide clear-cut answers to situational problems. Yeah, that I can tell you. While ethics govern the conduct of its professional members, the law governs the affairs within a community, state, or country. That's it. Counselors often have a problem determining when they have a legal problem or what to do with the legal issue once it has been identified. At times, a counselor may experience a conflict between the law and the ethical principles. When such happens, the counselor may need to apply his or her values. Exactly. It happened to me. I was once hurt by a client I had like 3 years before. They hurt me, and we were working together because we met elsewhere. And this is something I can tell you I experienced. I did not know what to do. Now, this is someone I had. The law is not even there in my country. The ethic codes, the professional guidelines are not there to guide. And so I started to use my own values. Yeah, and one of my values is I don't have to fight to win. I don't have to. That's one of my values. And even if it's difficult, because somebody may think, why did you keep quiet? Why didn't you do something about that? It's because I draw a lot of inner strength from within. Just allowing things to be, knowing that I don't want to have, I don't want to allow negative energies within me, because I know myself too well. Also, in such a case, it is important to seek legal advice, yeah, so that you can be on standby. Like for me, I'm still on standby, right? Just in case something happens in future and you will now resort to the legal advice. So the best way to deal with ethical issues is to resolve a conflict in a way that complies with the law and at the same time most nearly conforms to the codes of ethics. And so if it's possible, even when people resolve issues, you write down what you agreed. In Africa, that's a very big issue, because when people have conflicts, they don't even want to write down this is what we agreed. And that's when alternative dispute resolution, ADR practice in the name of mediation is really peaking in my country, because very many Africans though are related in one way or the other. It's a small world, and so they do not want to have these conflicts that later on you find you have to do business together. You find that you have to work together. You find that maybe your children will meet somewhere, like in the villages, because we still live in villages, or in estates, big estates. It's like Africans kind of know one another. I don't know about your space. And so conflict resolution, if it's also resolved ethically, then it gives you some safety of the future. What are the moral principles in counseling ethics that can apply? Principle A, autonomy, respect for people's rights and dignity. Autonomy is basically the will to engage in one's actions, freedom. Counselors should always respect the dignity and worth of all people, and the rights of individuals to their own privacy, so confidentiality is key, and self-determination. Even self-actualization, I want to put it here. When somebody is blocked from becoming the best version of themselves, to me, I would still say you have denied them autonomy to be. Counselors are aware of special safeguards that may necessarily protect the rights, may be necessary to protect the rights and the welfare of persons or communities whose vulnerabilities may deny them autonomous decision making. And so we need to know who they are, like children, people living with disability, the aged and the elderly. Uh, they also are aware of and respect cultural, individual, and role differences that include those based on age, gender identity, race, ethnicity, culture, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, disability, language, and socioeconomic status. At times in a country like mine that is developing, it may be a bit difficult, like to voice and speak publicly about some respect for some cultural practices or social cultural practices. But it's good for you to know as a counselor, even the training itself, like teaches you and brings out the character in you, that one is not abusive, that second is not discriminative. And so you may find yourself looking like you are lukewarm, or you are like sitting on the fence, or you're totally disagreeing with a particular way of dealing with people, but it's because there is a practice, there is a training you have gone through. Counselors should always be keen to consider these factors when working with members of such groups to eliminate their own biases and to avoid participating in activities that promote these prejudices. And that is why one of the course units maybe you had to do, and we haven't done it, we're going to do it next with you, is multicultural counseling. And I teach that, and you can see the dynamism in cultural practices and how it shifts the way people think, including the counseling. How can we treat clients in a way that shows we have allowed them to be autonomous? One, educate them on their rights. Second, give them responsibilities to see how they can do it. Provoke them to active thoughts. Give them a chance to express themselves, their fears, then encourage them. Just freedom of expression. They can narrate, then be patient and listen to them. However, there are these restrictions to a client's freedom that I may want to highlight. A client's freedom should not affect the rights of other people. It's because I'm free to do this and then I can harm the others. I can take my own beer. I can take my own, maybe I can behave in a certain way. I feel it's me. And then other people, you take beer and then you fight people. Maybe you go late at night. Clients come and say, it's my home, it's my house, but you're violating other people's rights. The client should understand the implication and consequences of the choices they make. They are competent and can take responsibility for their actions and the consequences as well. And so educate them that there are consequences that follow a certain behavior. Principle B, the principle of justice. Counselors ought to recognize fairness and justice. And so there is need to ensure that all people in need of counseling can access the services equally. So there are some, when I talk about maybe equally, maybe a standard pay is $50 and I don't have $50 and they have $50 and we need the same service. So when you talk about fairness, then I should be able to access counseling services at that affordable cost from my end. I wonder how this ought to happen. I don't know how it happens in your country. And this is where you find very many non-profit organizations coming and chipping in, or you find the government coming in and chipping in, or you find different practices are done differently. Like you find these are high, maybe profile counseling practitioners charging this amount of money and all that. They also ought to be aware of their potential biases and the boundaries of their competence. Yeah, so that you don't become unfair, you don't become unjust in offering your services, and the limitation of their expertise so that they do not accommodate unjust practices. And this is where we are in my country, educating especially the young counselors, because some of them can just come out, they want to charge the same amount of money like one seasoned counselor who's been there for over 25 years or even 30. Then principle C, the principle of integrity. All counselors need to promote accuracy, honesty, and truthfulness while engaging in counseling services. Therefore, counselors do not cheat clients, steal from clients, or do not engage in fraud or intentional misinterpretation of facts. Yes, do not lie to a client. If you don't know something, you don't know. And it's also good to read and seek help. Do not break promises or get into unwise or unclear commitments with clients. Yeah, do not just be vague or opaque when you're dealing with clients, especially those that are hurting or those ones that have come to realize closely like lie between the normal and the borderline, clinical borderline situations. Or when you have clients with severe mental health challenges, if they are outside your competence and you feel you might be forced to be to lack integrity, kindly refer them. So we have principle D, fidelity and responsibility. Counselors should always establish a relationship of trust with those with whom they work, meaning loyalty should be key. They should also remain aware of their professional and scientific responsibilities to society and to the specific communities in which they work. So thus, counselors uphold professional standards of conduct and hence accept appropriate responsibility for their behavior. Yeah, if you have not done well, and that's why clinical supervision is very important. That goes hand in hand. Clinical supervision. Practice, get clinical supervision. Practice, consult. Practice, refer. Practice, read, and learn. And that is going to boost your fidelity and responsibility. You are also responsible when you're able to manage conflicts of interest that could lead to exploitation or harm. Happens. Like in Africa, with the many ways we behave. So we would really love to encourage you as you get into the practicum field. Try to manage your conflict of interest. Further consult with other counselors or institutions to the extent needed so as to serve clients and others to the best of their ability. It's also good to ask whether you are genuinely concerned. Do you comply also with what your colleagues are also doing, or you're doing your own thing? Also strive to contribute a portion of your professional time for little or no compensation or for personal advantage, And I would encourage you as you begin so that you can deepen in the practice. If you have opportunities to volunteer outside your practicum, or when you get back to do advanced internship, please do. I am a product of a lot of volunteer work where I could, let me test whether this works, let me test whether confidentiality in a school environment works, let me find out. And you get people around that to support you, and the first one being your supervisor or the program supervisor. Principle E, beneficence and non-maleficency. Counselors should strive to benefit those with whom they work and take care to do no harm. Therefore, counselors will seek one to safeguard the welfare of those with whom they interact professionally. Second, minimize or avoid harm by solving conflicts with others in a rational manner. Guard against any personal, financial, social, organizational, or political factors that might lead to misuse of their influence. Yeah. And this can happen when people have positions, including a counselor. How do you use that position when it comes to other people? Do they sense you as an unsafe object? And that does not start when you get those high positions or when you become a seasoned professional or therapist. It will happen also when you have started, like now, when you're a beginning counselor. Look after their own physical and mental health to gauge whether they are doing well and whether they are okay or they are of good help to others. Unethical behavior in counseling can take many forms. Violation of confidentiality, although we know confidentiality is not absolute. It is not in a clean bracket, so it's not closed up. There are limitations to confidentiality, especially when there is a threat to harm self, client, or even a third party. Exceeding one's level of professional competence. Yeah, what you don't know, you don't know. You don't know psychometrics, you don't know psychometrics. Allow somebody else to do what they can do very best. If you have not specialized in marriage and family therapy and someone has and they are good at what they are doing, allow them. The negligent practice, yes, so this also we refer a lot to record keeping, a lot to who we also interact with when it comes to our client work. Ghosting clients is also not good because they don't know who to talk to. If their counselor cannot talk to them, who do they turn to? Then claiming expertise one does not possess, you will be sued. And when clients get to know this, and some clients are very smart, they will definitely ensure that you face the law. Imposing one's values on a client. Yeah, keep your own values to yourselves. Even when you find your client and you have similar values. Although in Africa we're having a very serious discourse on this, so that we can know what can't we separate ourselves from as Africans. And so maybe in your own context. Creating dependency in a client is also unethical, so they cannot do anything without you. And yet one of the ethical principles is to encourage them to be autonomous. Sexual activity with a client, yes, because you'll always feel they are lower than you. And so this can easily be termed as SGBV, sexual gender-based violence. Then dual relationships of any kind, barter trade, and all that, it's good to be aware. In Africa and in Kenya, we really try to ensure that the teacher counselor does only counseling. They don't teach and counsel at the same time because the students don't know how to relate with them in that context. The moral principles that involve a process of striving that is never fully complete. Is also good to notice that applying ethical principles and the related ethical standards is not as simple as it may seem, especially when dealing with culturally diverse populations. The ethical principles form the foundation of functioning at the highest ethical level as professionals, and we need to strive to adhere to that. How does confidentiality get breached? These are situations that will allow for breaching of confidentiality. They include, but not limited to, interest of providing competent services to clients, when clerical assistants handle confidential information as in managed care, when the counselor consults with experts or peers, when the counselor is working under supervision, and when other mental health professionals ask for information and the client has given consent to share, when a client poses danger to self or to others, when a client discloses an intention to commit a crime, when the counselor suspects abuse or neglect of a child, an elderly person, maybe if it's someone in a resident facility, disabled or people living with disability, or when a court orders a counselor to make records available, contractual terms of the counselor's employment, many situations that may find you breaching confidentiality. And when you are practicing as an intern or as a beginning counselor, most of the times you'll find yourself sharing information. Your supervisor your program supervisor should be able to guide you on when you're presenting clients for supervision. How do you present them? Because that's where you begin. You know, I remember when I was practicing at a diploma level, and one of my supervisors, when I was doing my practicum, told me that I'm using people's real names, you know, and they helped me to use pseudonyms. Then at advanced level, they helped me to use codes instead of even pseudonyms. Deeper again, they helped me to keep notes, maybe that you cannot easily read and identify who that person is, you know. For example, a counselor may be employed on explicit conditions where there maybe you may find that for those who go for internship in prisons, and the prisoners tell you things they have not testified, and so all this you may find, and some things is a plan to harm. Even in schools in my country, we have found the teacher counselors receiving information through students who give information that they're about to burn the school, and you find that if you keep quiet, what have you done? Cases of terrorism and all that. Well, I would like to let us come to the conclusion of our discussion. But probably before I read my conclusion clause, as an intern, do you already have some ethical or dilemmas that you already faced during your micro practice? As a counseling student, during the training of year 1, year 2, year 3 now, do you think when you reflect on what is happening in your nation, what is happening in your profession, do you think is easy to practice as a counselor? Looking at your age, because you know your age right now, do you think your age is a limitation to your ethical practice? When you listen to the many case studies that you have handled in class, do you think it is that easy to apply counseling ethics? If you also look at the unit that you did in ethics in counseling, did those ethics and ethical codes speak to you as a person, speak to you in relation to your ethnic, cultural context? You may also find that maybe as you did many case studies, did you find yourself like warming up to certain clients and not warming up to other clients? When you did your micro practice with your fellow students in class, did you find yourself getting stuck when it came to contracting, when it came to maybe defining the roles of the counselor and the client? Did you find yourself having the biases that could have made you look at your peer that you're practicing with in class differently? When you're also doing your recordings, because you did your recordings in class with your peers, and you haven't done, it's always good to do, so that you can sync with the ethical requirements. In your practice, did you find yourself offering autonomy to your clients? Did you allow them to be, or you kept feeling like you want to give them what comes from you and believing it's best? Did you give them the fairness? Did you listen to them enough? When you changed maybe people to practice with, were you able like to treat them fairly? So the small experiences in your practice that can ask whether you're ready to practice ethically. during the course of training, have you been able to keep private material? When I talk about private material, it's indeed private material to yourself, or you've been able to just speak it out. And even when you speak it out, is with what intention or what interests? So do a bit of reflection all around of what has been happening to you and whether you are so well versed with what is happening in your nation. What are the ethical dilemmas that you're likely to face in your country, in your practice, in your area of specialization? And now do you know where you need to go? Have you familiarized yourself with the legal instruments that guide the counseling practice in your country? Do you read about the general professional code of ethics for counselors that cuts across the universe? Very important. So in conclusion, counseling ethics are universal, and all practicing therapists are required to adhere to the same. During practicum and internship, a student can keep updating their practice by consulting their supervisor. They can do that by consulting their program director in their school. The site also supervisor is very helpful to tell you what happens in that institution, what happens in that context. They also need to keep referring to the ethical principles and guidelines and the code of ethics for that institution and in general, to avoid ethical dilemmas and confusion, and even when they come, to know how to resolve. And it's also good to ask the for the ethical practice codes when you go to any site. Ask what they use, ask how they operate, so that you remain working within the ethical boundaries. And you can read more on the references that we've been using in this class. You will find them very, very useful. I want to thank you so much for being in my class again. You're going to find in lecture 12 a case study that I would like you to apply in practice and try in the best way possible, because we are from different parts of this world, to look at that client from your context and from all the other units that we have covered in this class. Thank you for keeping me company in this class. This has been Dr. Susan Gitao, Lecture 11, Ethical Considerations in Counseling Practice. Thank you.